Hello, I'm Amy Dickson, and I'm very excited to be here with Huw Watkins, who is not only an amazing pianist, and he's also a wonderful composer, of course. So thank you very, very much for coming
Very
here.
kind of you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And we're here in the Royal Overseas League in London at Overseas House in the beautiful Princess Alexandra Hall. We're here in London because that's where we both live, and we're here to talk about a beautiful piece that you very kindly wrote for me in 2006.
Absolutely, and it's very appropriate that we're here actually, because it was the Overseas League that commissioned the piece, I seem to remember.
That's right. And
after you'd won the competition, is that right?
That's right, Hugh, thank you. They commissioned it for a concert that I was giving at the Wigmore Hall that year.
That's it.
With Catherine Millage.
Mm.
So I thought we'd start by just maybe talking a little bit about you.
Yeah, of course, yes.
And I was wondering, first of all, did you start out life as a pianist or as a composer, or was it a little bit of both?
I started as a pianist before, when I was too young to remember, but it wasn't long afterwards. I mean, there was a lot of manuscript paper lying around the house because my mother was a music school teacher, so it wasn't long before I started trying to fill it up with all sorts of dreadful things, probably, but I really immediately enjoyed doing that.
Shall we talk a little bit about how we met? I can't quite remember when it was.
I can't remember exactly when it was, probably in a pub near the Royal College of Music, where I think we were both.
No doubt.
I was a junior fellow at the time, and probably you were...
In the Royal College, not the pub.
in the Royal College, exactly, that's right.
Yes, well, I was doing my Masters in the Royal College.
Indeed.
Indeed. I think we probably met somewhere around then in the early 2000s.
Exactly,
exactly.
And I just remember being really excited and delighted when you approached me and said, would you like to write a saxophone piece?
Yeah, well, it was quite early on for me. I hadn't really worked with many composers before, actually, and I was so excited to work with you, of all people. And
that's very nice. No, I remember you really wanted to, and as you have done, commission pieces and work with composers. And it was very exciting to me to be one of the first, I think.
Oh. and also to have such a wonderful piece come out of it. It was a huge honour. So
thank you very
much. I've loved playing it ever since. Being such a very accomplished pianist, do you do most of your composing at the piano?
I do use the piano. It's a really vital tool for me, certainly, when I'm composing. I think I just like to start out by kind of improvising, by just messing around in a fairly unstructured way and just writing down as many ideas as I can. And then the hope is that the good ones will sort of rise to the top.
Right. And do you keep them in some format for later, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just have huge books, sheets of manuscript paper, which I fill up fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Actually deciding how a piece is going to start, that's the hard part.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting to know about how, when somebody says, can you write me a piece of music? But what happens next?
Well, I mean, I was thrilled when you asked me to write a saxophone piece. Always loved the saxophone, but never really had a chance or an opportunity to write for it. I tend to write a lot for people that I play with, actually.
Right, yeah.
So I'm in a lot of duos and chamber groups. So, I mean, I remember having many saxophone-type ideas, but not wanting to write a kind of cliched saxophone piece at all, certainly because I think that's the way you approach the instrument is to think more about its classical past, perhaps, than its jazz past.
Sure.
But I'm also, as a British composer, I'm a big fan of Mark Turnage, who perhaps is one of the
as am I.
the great sort of saxophone writers of any country, actually. So I definitely had his sound in mind, as well as a more kind of lyrical.
Yes.
Feel.
I was wondering about that, actually.
Yeah,
I can hear that a little bit.
Certainly happy to admit to that.
And had you written for many wind instruments before?
Certainly, I mean, yeah, sure, for all the other wind instruments in various
yeah.
combinations, but yeah, saxophone was the last one left to do.
Often the case.
Yeah.
No, I asked that because although we didn't really work on it very closely together when it was being composed, you have written for the instrument absolutely perfectly, as does Mark Tennant, actually.
That's good to know.
That's the phrasing and everything is very natural. Well, it seems like it came very naturally to you.
Well, that's a fluke if it did, I'm sure, because I don't have any sort of first-hand experience of playing a wind instrument. It's just it comes from listening to a lot of stuff, I suppose, and having a sense of what's idiomatic.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that it's
okay
that it's kind of playable.
Yeah, no, it was. And I vividly remember the first time that we sat down and played this piece together. I think it was...
Me too.
At the college.
Me too. In a room at the college. Yeah, it's always really exciting for a piece to come to life, particularly if it's a piece for an instrument that you haven't written for, or for a combination that's new. So
of course, yeah.
So yeah, I mean the piece is called Fanfares, and I love that strident quality that soprano sax sometimes can have, trumpet-like kind of.
Right, I was wondering.
Yeah, sure, and so definitely the opening of the piece has that.
Absolutely.
About it, that penetrating, bright sound.
And what comes first generally, the piece name or the piece?
It can vary so much. I mean, sometimes I might prefer to go for a much more abstract title, but more and more recently, I've been I've started off composing after reading a piece of poetry or looking at a painting or something that sparks something off. But in this case, I knew I wanted that kind of brash quality, so I like the idea of fanfares.
Yeah.
I mean, that's certainly not something that the whole piece is not like that. In fact, it's got...
No, well, it changes actually quite quickly.
Very early on it changes, and the whole second section is much more reflective and rather sad, I suppose.
Yeah. What was going on with that?
I can't remember.
No, well, it wasn't that bad.
So the fanfares themselves only account for quite a small proportion of the piece. The rest of it's an exploration, I suppose, of the more lyrical side of the soprano saxophone, that sort of wailing, sobbing sort of thing that it can do, that you do beautifully.
And right in the middle, there's a really emotional, quite expressive, loud,
Sure, yeah. Everything goes wild. The piano is sort of banging away very low down, the saxophone right at the top.
And then the saxophone's right at the top.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed writing that passage.
I enjoy playing it, especially with you. when we first started talking about the piece, I told you that I am more into playing the alto and the soprano saxophones than the others. And,
Yeah.
And you chose the soprano, and I was wondering why.
Well, you were talking about that passage that's very sort of strident and emotional, and I just love. I wanted to go high with it. I wanted to write as high as possible on the saxophone, so that was kind of the inevitable choice.
Good instrument choice.
And I guess there's something about the expressivity of the soprano sax that really appeals to me anyway. So.
Yeah, and the end, of course, is very contrasting to the beginning. There's nothing very.
That's true. It's
like about it.
well, not at all. Although there are little fragments from the opening fanfare gesture that come back in slow motion. It's wistful effect.
Yeah,
I think the
really
piano
touching,
playing these very high bell-like chords, the saxophone with longer lines. The notes are derived from the much faster material, but I think the effect, the mood is quite different.
Yes, absolutely.
And the very end of the piece is just a long lyrical phrase for the saxophone alone with a piano chord resonating until the end.
Yeah, it really dies out to nothing.
That's right, exactly. Leaving, I think, a bit of a question at the end.
Sure, right, okay. Yeah. So it's quite different from the trumpet-like quality.
Absolutely, there's no return at all to that material. It's definitely starts somewhere and ends up somewhere quite different.
Yeah, I've played it in concert quite a bit, and that's the bit that the audience always seems to hold their breath at the end.
Yeah, that's the idea. That's the idea. They shouldn't think it's quite over, I suppose.
No, it's a really magical moment.
Thank you.